Hey, we're live again. Thank you for tuning into this live stream. My name is Jeff Gilpin, and I'm here with my colleagues, Awana Missionary Jerry Berheim from Idaho and Bob Bennett from Pennsylvania, New York. And I'm incredibly excited about this topic, Connectional Ministry. And so we're going to talk a little about that. And so I just wanted to kind of kick off the conversation with saying this, is that without connection, there is no ministry. It's kind of one and the same. And it's like, there's no such thing as a tall, short person there, and so discipleship and relationship are one and the same. So I just want to start with that, and we'll just kind of kick off the conversation. And by the way, if you're watching this live and you have comments, if you want to post those in there, and if I see those, I can add those into our meeting here. And so Connectional Ministry. Bob, what are you thinking? I mean, just kind of broadly, your thoughts.
Well, we've been talking about child discipleship now for a long time, and in the context of Awana, we have game time, and we have large group time and small group time. And for years now, I've been telling the people that I work with that you can teach in large group time. You can convey knowledge. You can teach them. You can teach them songs. You can teach them to memorize a verse. You can teach them the meaning of those verses. But if you're going to disciple that child, it has to be on a heart-to-heart level. You can't do discipleship in a large group. You can teach in a large group, but you can't do discipleship. It has to be done heart to heart. And so that requires small group or one-on-one type participation. And so 2 weeks ago, I went to visit a club, and it was a church that I had not been to before. And so I got there, and before I even walked in, I could hear all kinds of noise. That game time was just getting started, and it was really neat to see that. And then they went upstairs, and the kids all just fanned out. This church has 2 rooms. They have the fellowship hall, and they have the basement of the church, and then they have the sanctuary upstairs. And the kids fanned out, and so many leaders came in. It made it almost one-on-one. They could sit there for half an hour or so and work with those kids and disciple them. And so to me, that's like a tremendous program, even though it's at a small little country church out in the middle of nowhere. And they were kind of embarrassed by it. They're like, oh, we don't have the, big groups and everything. Well, I'd rather see one leader, one caring adult sitting down with one child and doing discipleship, because then I know that child is getting the discipleship they need.
Yeah. I mean, how do we help kids rather than, are we just producing content? How are we leading them to develop a closer relationship with the Lord? So yeah, Jerry, your thoughts.
Yeah, boy, Bob, you really, I wrote down that I hadn't really thought, but I think it's so true. We said discipleship in a large group, man, they don't go together, but yet so many times we think getting more bang for our buck. And, I say that, but really reality is, man, what I need to do, can I do more with less, right? And yet I expect the deeper relationship to happen. And you're right, discipleship, as we go, well, okay, let's make sure we're filtering everything through the lens of Scripture, right? And we go, so what did Jesus do, and how did he do it? Well, he went on a walk for a few years, right, with a few guys. Now that doesn't mean that he didn't actually talk to the multitudes. He did, right? He did talk to the multitudes, but he didn't miss the single one either. The woman at the well, or several different ones like that. And he went on a journey. Like I said, he went on a journey for 3.5 years. We know with a group of 12 guys, and 11 of them really made it to the end. So we recognize, and even in that 12, he had 3, right, that he really poured into. And then you go, but also he spent tremendous time with who? With the Father. He would find himself drawing away. So then I put that together, and I'm thinking about what you said. Discipleship isn't always the large crowd. We're talking to a lot of people. We love to be able to cast that big vision when we talk to groups of kids and things like that. But getting to know their name, pausing, like you were saying, Bob. I was at a club ministry here just a short few weeks ago, and what did I see? I saw people sitting at round tables with 1, 2, and 3 kids. No more than that. No more than that. Knowing them, walking through, learning, opening up the Bible, opening up their Awana handbook, going through there, meeting them where they're at, learning about them. And I have to believe, as I even tried to eavesdrop on some of the conversations, they were asking things besides just, hey, can you repeat that because you didn't get it word perfect? Like, hey, so how are things going this week? You know, we prayed about these, and I love that. Discipleship. Yeah, it's gritty. It's gritty. I like it.
You know, you're talking there, and I mean, this wasn't on our agenda, which kind of shame on me. But I think the first thing is, how is our connection with the Lord? And really, our ministry flows out of the outflowing of our relationship with the Lord. And so, when we think about that, is hey, are we executing, or is it a ministry? And so, it's a ministry, and you know, if we have, you know, we're Awana Missionaries, and if we have a bunch of ministry directors who have club directors, who have leaders, who have kids, and nobody spends time with the Lord, then really, what are we doing? We're just kind of shuffling papers and turning the lights on, turning them off. Were you going to say something, Bob? I see you.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. I was just waiting for the right moment to jump in because you kind of struck a chord in my own life. But also, as I've been teaching people to be disciple makers, it's important that the kids know that you yourself are wrestling with some things, that God's working in your heart to teach you, that you're constantly learning to get better as a follower of Christ. And I'll never forget in my own life, I had a situation when I was a teenager. I had a pretty foul mouth, and I really wasn't living for the Lord at all. And I was at a football game one time, and I ran into or I had a little kid run into me, and I had 2 cups of hot chocolate in my hand, and I spilled them all over me, all over myself and everything. And I started, you know, getting mad at that kid and calling him names. And I looked up, and there stands one of the deacons from our church, standing behind the counter serving. And so he got me some paper towels, and he helped me wipe off, and got me 2 new cups of hot chocolate. And I thought, oh man, I am in so much trouble. When he goes back and tells our pastor, when I see him on Sunday, he's going to let me have it. And so I'll never forget walking into church that Sunday morning, and he called me aside, and I thought, oh great, he's going to chew me out, like he's going to let me have it. And he said, hey, I heard some things come out of your mouth at the football game the other night, and I just wanted to ask you if you would pray for me. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I struggle with those same things. He said,
Wow.
when I'm at work and I hit my thumb with a hammer, or I get mad at a customer because of something happened, he said, I want to lash out to them. I want to use that. That's just natural for me to use that kind of foul language. And I really have to watch what I say. And I'll pray for you if you'll pray for me. And here's this deacon of our church talking to me. I mean, I was about, I don't know, 15, 16, but he's saying, hey, I struggle with that same issue, right?
Wow.
And I have to work on that.
Mm.
And that helped me understand that it's okay for me not to be perfect. Like it's okay. And I think so many times Awana leaders and pastors and deacons, and you know, we try to put on this mask, and we try to pretend to the kids, hey, we've got this all down. We know exactly, you know, we've got our manufactured lesson for tonight, you know. And I think sometimes for us to just sit down with the kids and say, hey, you know, I know you're struggling with something, but I'm struggling with some things too. And it's okay for that to happen. And I think when those kind of conversations happen, that's when discipleship really, that's when that child's heart is changing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's kind of interesting the way you say that. You know, us messing up is not contrary to the gospel. That confirms what the Bible says, right?
Exactly.
You know, like every you have those people say, "Hey, all those Christians are hypocrites," and you go, "Well, yeah, that's
who we are."
The Bible, right? That confirms the Bible." So,
well, don't you believe so truly, Bob, and what you're saying is if we do sometimes tend to masquerade ourselves up. We put on some pretty good mask about who we tend to be. And here's this deacon of your church. You didn't have a chance to put a mask on. You would have if you would have realized he would have been standing there, right?
Sure.
And you know, in your mind you say that, and yet here he's sitting there going, I'm struggling with that same thing. And we go, and the children that we're working with today, and we think about connections. They're seeing and living a lot of these same things. So can we be open and honest enough to recognize where we're at, where we're walking spiritually, and where we're nurturing, and so.
Yeah, you know, I think people can smell your relationship with the Lord. It's just there's an aroma that they, you know, and there's people that you know that. I remember Rory Berheim, the founder of Awana, man, you could just tell that he was the real deal. He just had an aroma about him, and I've known people like that who they're the real deal, man. And so anyways, hey, connecting with the Lord, connecting with the kids. I mean, maybe some practical thoughts on, you know, how do we get better at that, or what does that mean, or I don't know. What do you think, Bob?
Well, I think there's a few things that most Awana clubs are not really good at, and so let me start with those. Learning the kids' names. I see so many Awana leaders that just kind of herd kids around, and they don't really take time to recognize that child's individuality. Right? We need to know their names. Now, I know I'm not very good with names. I'll grant you that. And if I'm in, you know, if I was running an Awana club with a couple of hundred kids, I may not know all their names, especially kids. If I was working in Sparks, I might not know all the TNTers or all the Cubbies, but somebody at your church should know every child's name, and beyond that, somebody should be looking to greet them every week when they walk in the door. You know, some of the best Awana clubs that I've been to, they have people actually stationed by the door to give high fives and call kids by name as they walk in. And if you're able to have a database of some kind where you can know which kids had birthdays this week, or which kids had some significant thing going on, and so you can when they walk in the door, you can give them a high five, say, hey, I see you know, your mom said that you won your baseball game or whatever. Then at least those kids know, hey, this guy recognized, like, he knows me. And so knowing kids' names, I think, is important. And then another one that is kind of a pet peeve of mine is that as adults, we tend to want to look busy. So that, like, we think that brings worth to what we're doing. Like, if I'm really busy, people must think I'm important, right? So I got to just be really busy. Even if it's just moving some tables and chairs or shuffling papers, I'm going to look really busy. And really, for discipleship to happen, we need to have the opposite to happen. We need to have time for them. So we need to get the tables and chairs moved and things done so we can actually just be standing in the hallway when those kids arrive, so we can talk to mom and dad and we can engage with them and not be so busy that they feel like they have to just drop their kids off and not talk to us because they don't want to take us away from something.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Absolutely, Bob. I think you suppose sometimes when we think about making these connections and we try to think about that, and you're right, we get locked up in the busyness of it, the dotting the I's. I guess in a spiritual thing, we would say we get a little more wound up about Martha and Mary, right? Type of deal. When we think about that, and they both matter. You go, well, so if you you have a secretary person or a type A person, it's like, man, the details matter, you know, but if we take that and all the club is about, or that our ministry is about all the details, and we miss the person, I don't care how straight the forms look and everything is spelled correct. If we miss that relationship, we do get off track there. A great quote, I had to look it up and I just found it. A friend of mine sends me these every now and then. It says, and I think this fits really well, success isn't always about greatness. It's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. And that was by Dwayne Johnson. But, you know, when we think about that, sometimes I think we get that backwards. We think we're going to be great, and it's all about the great things that we do, and really it's about being consistent. What's consistency look like when we show up? What's consistency look like in my life, right? I mean, I love the people that are consistent in my life because I know they care. That transpires right down into when we're working with the future of the church, right? These 2, 3, 4, 5 on up year olds.
You're talking, I was thinking, you don't know every kid's name, but you can know the kids' names in your small group.
Right. Exactly.
For sure. I think the other thing is, you're saying, arriving and saying hello, but if you get there just a little bit early, so you're ready, you're not scrambling at the last minute to get your study up or get the pins up or get the flags up. Get there a few minutes early so that you're ready when 5 or 10 minutes before a club, say 5 minutes, when those kids start showing up, you can be available to say, hey, how you doing? So on and so forth. And then the other thing I was thinking, Jerry, you're talking about the club secretaries, and I call those people director of first impressions, right? And so I remember several years ago, one of our secretaries was out, and so they asked me to do it. And I'm not mostly administratively gifted at all. And I had that little check-in sheet, and these kids are standing in line, man. And I'm, hey, Billy, how you doing, man? Oh, man, you're wearing your crazy hat. I love that hat, and having a good time. And I'm just checking things, and I don't even know what I'm doing. And so the rest of the secretaries are like, hey, at the end, how are you you really gonna keep those records that well? How are you gonna know who won at the end of the night, what team color won? And I said, I'll just make it up. The red team will win this week. And they're like in shock. But the important thing is, as those kids are coming in, is that we knew them, we loved them. I think one other thought I have is, back in the day, we used to call kids during the week. We used to do years ago, we used to do home visits. I know there's some child protection issues with that. And, we kind of live in a different world, but how do we, serve these kids? It's not just we execute ministry on them for an hour and a half once a week, but how do we really disciple them, build relationships even outside of club? And so were you going to say something, Bob? I saw you kind of.
Well, yeah, I don't know how long we want to go here tonight, but I want to, because I can keep pulling out pet peeves all night long, but secretaries and other people that serve in Awana. And I think one of the drawbacks that I see for many people, they take too much stuff on themselves. So I run into Awana ministry directors that are trying to do all the secretarial work themselves. They're trying to, because either nobody else can do it the way I would like to have it done, right? Or they feel like we have to keep up appearances. So I've got to make sure all our ducks are in a row. When in fact, the biggest thing we have to do here is to disciple these kids, and it's about the relationship that we have. So we need more help, then we need to go get more help. We need to figure out, how do we solve that issue? How do we recruit more leaders? How do we better train the leaders we have? How do we share the responsibilities so I'm not stuck doing all the work and the one that's too busy to greet somebody tonight when they show up?
Yeah. Shane here. Shane's in Utah, and name tags. So I've seen their name tags, and they actually hang them on a lanyard, and then they leave them at the church. And I think they put their awards on them. And so, yeah, name tags for sure, especially in the beginning, until especially us older people, forget names,
Yeah, I was at one club, and that's how they do attendance. The kids all have name tags. So the kids come in and take their name tag and put it on and go play game time or whatever. And then after everybody's in there, they can look and see who's still on the board. Those are the kids that didn't show up tonight. And the way they have it set up is everybody that's still on the board when we're halfway through club gets a postcard. Later this week is going to get a postcard from us in the mail that says, hey, we missed you last week. I hope you're coming next week.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, sometimes taking attendance is not to find out who's there, is to find out who's not there. Because if they're not there, if they're not there 1 week, okay. But if they're not there 2 or 3 weeks in a row, there's some kind of problem. We say the same thing taking, keeping the records, if
Mhm.
they're one section behind, okay, but if they start to get to be 2, 3, 4 sections behind, then there's an issue. So keeping records is not to see who's going to finish their book, maybe as much as who's behind, and is there an issue with discipleship and so on. So, hey, what about connection with parents? I mean, we 168 weeks in a year, or 168 hours in a week,
Mhm.
and we have them for an hour and a half, 2 hours, give or take. And the parents have them a lot. They are the primary disciple makers. And
Mhm.
so for us to come along, I mean, what are your thoughts about that, Jerry?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, we think about the number of weeks, you just said it, the number of hours we have in a week, the number of weeks we have in the year. Sometimes, as I've heard and seen, parents come, and some of them are very appreciative that it is an opportunity where they can drop their kids off and to get a bit of breather time and that sort of thing. And we appreciate that. And sometimes we grumble on that a little bit, if we're all going to raise our hand and be honest, like, I didn't really want to give that time up myself. I don't have but what about these primary disciple makers? We go, well, are they? Well, yes, they are, because that's where these kids live. We barely have them, but spending some time getting, just like we know the child's name, right? Do we know that loving, caring adult? Now, granted, that is some more time. We go, well, where does that bandwidth come from, Jerry? Well, that bandwidth comes from, we got to say, Lord, what matters here? Every child matters. Every loving, caring adult that's pouring into these kids matter. We have to get to know them and maybe learn their circumstances just a little bit, right? Pause a little bit. Look, we sometimes even talk within this grouping up is looking up and looking out. What are we doing? What are the opportunities that lay before us? Do we know why Johnny has a hard time remembering to bring a book? We've told him multiple times. Do we know anything about his life or what's going on in his home? What a great opportunity for us. So the more we can engage mom, dad, I use the term loving, caring adult. That's truly what it is. More we can engage the loving, caring adult, not overwhelming them. Granted, nobody needs to be overwhelmed, but here again, hey, somebody says, hey, Bob, yeah, man, really, really loved having Tim. Glad you're able to bring Tim. I notice guys kind of are only able to make it like every other week. And maybe Bob says, yeah, Jerry, I work on that those other weeks. And so we really don't have a ride to get him there. And it's like, oh, really? Well, maybe we can sit down and figure out a solution for that. And Bob, is there anything we can help you guys with? Maybe it's the time of year and Bob's like, well, work's been tough. There's just things like that. That's like, what can we do? Are we willing to get messy? Are we willing to go on that walk and get our feet dirty? I hope we are. The kids ultimately matter. And these kids are turning into adults every day. We watch that at a younger age.
Messy. I like that word.
Mm.
What about you, Bob?
Yeah, so I was visiting a club one night that decided to put an evening meal into their Awana club. So they have they moved Awana to Sunday, and they decided that they're going to have their Awana club is like from 4 to 6 p.m. on Sunday, and then at 6 p.m. they have a meal for the whole church, for all the parents that are coming to pick up their kids. It's open to anybody. And so, club was over by that point, and I'm just kind of wandering around, and the Awana ministry director said, hey, make sure you get something to eat before you leave for home, whatever. Yeah, okay, great. And so I sat down and I sat down, and this young lady comes in and she sits down across the table from me, and she's got 2 little kids in tow, so she's balancing like 3 plates. She sits down there, and so I said, I see your kids are in Awana. I'm the Awana missionary. Can you tell me a little bit about what do you like best about Awana? What's it meant to you? And she said, oh, you have no idea. She said, my husband and I, and she started, almost crying. She said, my husband and I went through a divorce about 1.5 years ago. And she said, this Awana Club has been the one consistent thing in my children's life. They've been bounced around from family member to family member. We had to go stay with different people. We had to, till I could get a job and get back on my feet and those kind of things. And she said, but Awana has been consistent in their life. And the people at this church have loved my kids through this whole process. And I said, really? And she said, and you can't believe how much that, she said, I can't express how much that means to me that these people would love my kids. And they've reached out to me, and people in the church have tried to help me and things like that. But it just means so much to me that these people would love my children. And so one of the things that I think we could do if we want to connect with parents, I hear all the time, oh, you can't get parents to help their kids memorize verses at home. You can't get them to do the work at home. You're not going to get them to do that. And I think one of the things we need to focus on is not how much can we get the parents to do, but how much can we love these kids so that the parents will see that we care about their kids, that we are here to be an influence in their kids, to help their kids come to know Christ and live for him for the rest of their lives. And as we do that, parents are going to come and say, hey, I want to be a part of that. Like I want to connect with you. Like I want to know what's going on. Now, in every club, you're going to have those parents who don't want to help, the parents that are like, look, just take my kid for a couple hours so I can have some peace and quiet. We're going to have that. But many of the parents, they're going to recognize it if you genuinely love their kids versus you're just trying to get through the kids to the parents. Like, again,
they can smell that.
Yeah, right. I've met a lot of churches that, oh, we want to have a great Awana club because we want to reach their parents. And as soon as they say that, I think to myself, well, then the kids don't really matter. It's the parents that are the real people that you're trying to go after. And that, to me, that just hurts because that's not a very Christ-like attitude toward child discipleship. And I think we need to love the kids and build into their lives and allow the parents to see us doing that. Now, it has to be done in a God-honoring way. Let me throw that caveat out there. We need to make sure that we follow, child protection policies and all that kind of stuff. But if we genuinely love their kids, parents will respond to that, and they will want to hear what we have to say when we come and talk to them about something.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just a couple of my thoughts is number one is parent outreach events. So we do those at our club, the Awana Grand Prix. We have different things. Tomorrow night at our club, we're having an ice cream Sunday night, the biggest ice cream Sunday in Truckee. And the parent, we have enough ice cream for, we put it in a rain gutter, and we have enough ice cream for parents as well. I think the other thing is,
all you need is a few more spoons.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. No, you can't do it that way anymore, can you? Shucks, sweet.
The other thing too is I think sometimes, I remember a couple of years ago with COVID, and we were talking, people were complaining we can't get kids to get on Zoom, and how are we going to do ministry? And I thought, what if all we do for ministry is call these parents and encourage them, and maybe some of those parents that don't come to or are not involved in Awana either, they don't help their kids in their books, or even though we know that they should, maybe they're just at the end of their rope. We just don't know what's going on in the people's lives, and so we have to be sensitive to that. We continually reach out, but just knowing that sometimes parents need help. And then I had another note, I can't remember.
I think too, Jeff, you'd struck on a little bit earlier, but sometimes we start measuring all the negatives.
Right.
Yes,
we tend to roll into the negatives, and I rightfully so. There's things that we need to address, and we need to stop. But maybe what we have to really look at is, what are we doing? And the three of us folks, we always have this caveat: doing something is better than doing nothing, right? And so we have. I think, how many times could we look at these relationships and lean into what's going well? Yeah, we say on one hand, well, if you would work with your kids more, they could pass off, and then they wouldn't be upset if they aren't getting these awards. But on the other hand, if we look at and we say, hey, here's some benefits to studying God's word and see what God's word is doing and record it and write it down. And how has God impacted, because his word, he promises it won't return void. Sometimes I think we measure the wrong things, and we need to put a different.
I like that comment. I don't know if you guys can see that. Do what you can, when you can, how you can. because you can. So yeah, we just do the best we can.
Yeah.
And let the Lord do the rest. And so,
Amen.
So I don't know if we have time for another story here, but just a couple of days ago, I met a pastor, and he says, "Hey, I was saved in Awana. Now he doesn't have Awana at his church right now, but he said, hey, I was saved as a kid in Awana, and he said, I'm probably the only kid that was kicked out of Awana 3 different times because of my behavior, and the third time." He said, my brothers and I, we were just, we raised a lot of Cain while we were there. We raised a lot of problems at the church, and the church was at the end of their rope, and they kicked us out of Awana. And but the pastor and one of the elders came over to my house to explain to my parents that their church loved the kids, but if they're going to come back to Awana, we have to follow the rules. And then the pastor went on to say, that's just like salvation. We can't come to God on our own terms. We have to come to God under his terms, on his rules, the way he set it up. And if we're not willing to do that, then we can't get to heaven, right? And so he went on to give the plan of salvation to this guy and his siblings and his mom and dad. And he said, because of that meeting with that pastor, over the course of the next 6 months, everyone in my family trusted Christ as Savior, including my mom and dad. So he said, here's a situation that most churches would have just kicked us out and wiped their hands and said goodbye. But this pastor said, I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to use this as a way of witnessing and telling these parents, sharing the gospel with them. And eventually the whole family came to know Christ as Savior. And now this guy's a pastor. And he said, the only reason I'm here today is because somebody loved me enough to reach out to me after I'd been kicked out of Awana and tell them that, they wanted us to come back, but we have to follow the rules. And so I think sometimes even when we have those difficult situations in our clubs, if we allow God and the Holy Spirit to work through us, we can use those to make connections with people that God can use to draw more people into his kingdom.
It's kind of funny. Hey, God can use Awana even for kids that get kicked out of Awana.
That's right.
Hey, what about?
It's all about. I mean, it comes back to that love of Christ. It becomes back to when we have that love, when we know, and you know what, Jesus didn't make excuses for people, right? He didn't answer all. But you know what? He had that love, and he showed that ultimate love, right? The end of that walk I talked about earlier. He laid his life down on the cross. And when as leaders, as we go, man, we have these difficult things, but we love your child. We love you. We want to have you a part here. It's interesting what that transfers to.
Probably too, there's been, how many disciplined conversations did that pastor have that didn't produce fruit, but by, like this comment, doing what you can, when you can, how you can, because you can, over and over and over, that God can use that. So, hey, so what about connection with leaders? And what I mean by that is, if you're a Sparks director, you have leaders that you need to be connected with, and they just don't show up Wednesday night. And if you're a commander or a Awana Ministry director, you have club directors that you work with and are connected with. I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Practical ideas about connecting with the leaders, et cetera. Jerry?
Well, we live in a time when we have more connection strings than you could even begin to think about, right? I mean, Marco Polo, texting, Messenger, and there's that go way beyond this white beard for sure. But I seriously believe that sometimes the simplest things we can do is just doing something. There again, that do it can, when you can, all the whole thing about can. And is it hard to say something positive about Bob? Bob, you've been serving. Hey, just thank you, man. Thank you for coming. Thank you for engaging. Versus, hey, Bob, it'd be better if you made sure you had your uniform on, or could you show up? Could you show up a little bit? Or all these things that earlier. Could you we can come down this list of critiques, or can we be encouraging and drop a note, send a Marco Polo, right? How fun is that, right? Simple. Doesn't take me more than a few seconds to send an encouraging word to a Bob or to a Jeff, or thank him for serving. People love to hear that. And then on occasion, which I keep a pile of them on my desk, is what's a simple thank you card, right? I like to get cards in the mail. It's like, somebody paid attention, right?
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, I can't remember who it was, and they were sort of at the end of their rope with just life. And somebody sent them an encouraging text, and it just made all the difference. And so, as we serve with these people, you just don't know what's going on in their life. And so to send an encouraging text, or, you mentioned Marco Polo or a jib jab or a card or something, Facebook message, just reaching out and thanking them for their ministry and how are you doing? Or we have leaders in our club that I just drop by their house, and to be honest with you, some of the times when I drop by people's house, it's for my benefit too, because I need to be encouraged, and I have a group of people that, they encourage me just as much as I encourage them. So yeah, Bob, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think when we're connecting with the other Awana leaders in our church, there's a communication side of things. We need to communicate stuff. We need to talk about, policies, and we need to talk about how we're dealing with this and that. We need to talk about individual clubbers. Many clubbers have interaction with several Awana leaders during the night, and we might need to talk about that clubber. How are they handling this? Or maybe there's some tragedy that's happening in a child's life, and we need to communicate that stuff. So on one hand, we need to be careful that we keep all those lines of communication open, and I don't think we communicate enough. I don't think it's possible to over communicate. We need to work on that all the time. And then on the other side of things, I think Jerry hit on this about thanking people and encouraging people. And I have a little plaque that hangs up here that says, it's easier to be the watchdog than it is to be the shepherd. And, so often we see things happen and we're quick to yap at that, like, I don't like the way you're doing that. And couldn't you just be here a little earlier? And why didn't you take time to make sure that was written down, or send that, fill out your paperwork right before you left? And we can go to people. We're very quick to go to people and say, hey, this didn't work out right. You got to change this, or I don't like your attitude, or whatever. I don't like what's going on here. That's the watchdog side of things. But from time to time, all of us need to be the shepherd. We need to walk alongside people and say, hey, is there something going on that I can help you with? Is there a way that I can encourage you? And sometimes it's a card. My years ago when I was a young man, my pastor had this thing he called Appreciation Sunday, and one Sunday a month he would call somebody out, just right in the middle, maybe not right in the middle of the service, but at the beginning or end of the service. Nobody knew who it was going to be, but on Appreciation Sunday, somebody was going to get appreciated, and he would call somebody out, and he'd actually make them come forward, and he'd have them come up on stage and he'd say, now, people, I want to tell you what she does every week here. She serves in the nursery for us, or she works in the sound room, or this person behind the scenes does all this work that nobody knows about except me, and I want to make sure she's appreciated. And the church would give her a big round of applause, and he'd give her just a little pen, like it wasn't anything except a little pen. But that little gift that our pastor was giving somebody in appreciation and the recognition in front of everybody was something that just spurred people on to do even more, even though most people didn't want to go up front. They would be like embarrassed. And but it was an important thing, because he was sharing with the whole church, hey, I'm not the only one that does anything around here. Everybody does their part. Yeah, and I think in Awana clubs, we need to be the shepherd sometimes. Often we need to be the shepherd and say, hey, is there something we can do to encourage you? And then whatever the Lord leads us to do is what we need to do to encourage that brother or sister who's, just been faithful to serve, maybe for years and years and years. And I could tell you all kinds of stories about longtime Awana leaders I've run into that have been serving for 30, 40, even 50 years. They've been serving in Awana. And can you imagine the number of kids they've had the privilege of discipling over those years, and the impact, the kingdom impact that they're able to have?
You know, I would say too is that could go both up and down the chain of leadership.
Absolutely.
In other words, sometimes, how do they say, it's lonely at the top? You know, and if you're the club director and you get people complaining to you, parents complaining to you, for a leader to come up to that director and say, hey, thank you for all you're doing, I appreciate.
Right.
Or for the club director or leaders to go to the Awana ministry director or even the pastor and say, hey, you know what, I'm praying for you. I thank you for your leadership. And so it works both up and down the chain of leadership. I'll just give you one tip. You know, when I was the Awana ministry director, I used to call my club directors. Our club is on Tuesday. I used to call them every Monday and, hey, you know, it's Crazy Hat Night this week. And do you have everything you need? Is there anything you need from me? Most of the time it was a very brief phone call. Occasionally, though, they had spiritual needs. And so I was just kind of taking their temperature and seeing where they're at. So, yeah. Hey, so the last thing is, how do we connect with the church? And what I mean by that is, you know, sometimes and a very unhealthy view is that the Awana Club is just this Boy Scout club that's hosted, that the club uses the building. And it's not a ministry of the church. It's just this outside thing. And that's not a very healthy situation. So the Awana Club, the way it's designed, it should be under the leadership and authority of the church. And so how do we connect with the church, you know, have our club connected with the church?
So he didn't pick either of us, Jerry. So I don't know if you want to go first.
I saw that somebody put on there, take him a little baked cookie, and I was like, hey, that's worthy of me posting up on there.
Food is always. I serve on the leadership board at our church, and you know what? That'll get you places, right?
That could apply to all 5 of these connections. Take cookies to the parents, take cookies to the kids, take cookie, you know. So I think you know, my quick thoughts on that, and you're right, Jeff. We the 3 of us serve a lot of churches, and we've been into some scenarios where it is kind of tough, and yet I wonder if we go back as leaderships in the club and we look at our church and we go, our ministry, our Awana ministry should actually absolutely be twined with our church. And so do we know what the mission and the vision of our church is? And sometimes we have to peel back a little bit. We have to get back and figure out where we're at and where we're headed. And we have to know that, you know what, are we on that same trajectory? If we're not, then that's a whole nother conversation. But I bet you we are. I bet the church is all about reaching the lost and discipling the lost and discipling people as they grow. And in Awana, we want to do that same thing. We want to reach kids. We want them to know, love, and serve the Lord Jesus Christ. So I think so much of it fundamentally comes back to making sure, and then honestly, sharing is what is God doing? What has God done? What does he continue to do in and through this ministry arm of the church? And I truly believe the best things happen within the children's ring of the church, without any doubt. Let's not hide it. Let's make sure we're showing that. Yeah, I mean, how many times? I mean, does the club share with the church, hey, about salvations and about discipleship? Or, I mean, we need to be letting the church know, hey, this ministry is producing fruit. And so, yeah. What about you, Bob?
Yeah, just a couple of tips that I always share with people is, first of all, you've got to keep the church leadership informed about what's happening. And I don't mean just to say, hey, on such and such a date, we're going to have Crazy Hat Night, right? I mean, the deacons probably don't really care what night your Crazy Hat Night's on, but they need to understand what you do in Awana. So what I always did when I was running a club is I would find excuses, like reasons that I need to have a little extra help for tonight. And then I would go and ask one of the elders or one of our pastors, hey, would you come on this night and help us with crowd control? Would you help us with, we're going to have special games and we're going to need extra people to help with those games, or we're going to do some special theme, and we're going to need you to come and help with that. Or if, let's say, they run a business, and I would go to them and say, hey, would you come in and talk to our boys about what it's like to be a businessman in today's world, a Christian businessman in today's world? Like, would you come in and just share a few minutes, share your testimony? And what that does is that gets them into Awana, so they see what's happening on Awana night, and they see all the kids. So then when maybe something negative happens, some parent calls the church and complains about something, or maybe it's budget time and you have to ask for more money in the Awana budget because you got to buy more ice cream or whatever, right? But whatever the case is, when that thing happens and they're faced with a decision about what they're going to do with the Awana, this request, their mind is going to go back to, oh yeah, I saw all those kids that were down there running around that game circle. I saw all those. I had one elder tell me, now I'm dating myself here, but I had one elder tell me he'd never seen so many gray shirts before, right? Because we used to use the gray uniforms years ago. And he was there. We had a couple of hundred kids, and he's like, I never saw so many kids in gray shirts before, because he was never downstairs on Wednesday night when we were having Awana to see what was happening. And so after that, he was much more apt to vote, yeah, give them all the money they need. Let's help them out, because he saw the value in what we were doing. So you got to get them involved. If you can get them involved at all, you've got to get them involved in some little way. I would not put them in charge of something unless they want to be. Like if they want to be a TNT leader or something, that's great. And by the way, I've run into many pastors who are more than happy to come and work with the kids on club night, because it's something different for them, and they like to come and be a TNT leader or a Sparks leader. And so maybe you can get them involved that way, but I wouldn't put a responsibility on them unless they ask for it. But I just get them in there and let them get involved, have them help with crowd control, or like you were mentioning, you were checking people in on the list. Hey, our secretary can't be here tonight. Could you come down and just check kids off as they come in, on the list? And that lets them see what you're doing in club. And then the other thing that I think should happen is your whole church congregation needs to be informed about what's happening in club and what Awana is and why we have Awana. Jerry mentioned the missions and value statements. Make sure that if it's at all possible, that announcements are made from the pulpit, or that your pastor mentions Awana in his message. Feed him some stories, so that when he's putting together his Sunday message and it's on, whatever subject, he's like, oh, I remember when she told me that story about this kid in our club that, relates to. Because when he mentions those things, it raises the value of the ministry that you have going on. And so make sure that your congregation hears about it. If they, if you're not able to make announcements at the pulpit, maybe they put slides up on the screen before church starts or something. Get somebody to help you make some great slides to put up there with those. Go ask somebody, hey, could we put something on there? If your church has a Facebook page or things like that, you need to make sure that somebody from Awana can put a post on there once in a while to help you communicate with your entire church family. Hey, this is the great thing we have going on in our Awana club. Because really, believe it or not, every person in your church should have something to do with Awana. We have, with discipling kids at least, because we all have kids in our family. We have grandkids. We have neighborhood kids. This is the future of our church we're talking about. Every person in your congregation should have an interest in what's happening in your Awana club. And so I would encourage you to find ways to communicate that in good ways to your entire church every time you have an opportunity. You guys probably know what an elevator speech is, right? So when you have something to say, you could come up with a big long speech, but what if you had to explain that to somebody in an elevator while you were riding between floors, right?
Yep.
So you need to figure out, okay, here's a short speech I can give somebody if I'm walking down the hallway with them, and then here's a longer explanation I can give, like to a pastor or elder or somebody about the things that are happening in Awana. And I would encourage you to do that because it's so important.
I think nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I think that applies to everything we've talked about tonight. You genuinely care. Yeah.
I'll just give you some of my thoughts. We, at the beginning of the year, 2 or 3 weeks before club start, we asked our pastor for a few minutes on a Sunday, hey, Awana starting, we need volunteers. But at that point, we just don't say, hey, Awana starting. We talk about, we give an elevator speech on why kids matter, why this is the church of 2050. So we do that. Years ago, we used to do something called an Awana Sunday. We'd ask all of our leaders and all of our kids to come to Awana with their uniforms on. And then we would just, hey, we have an Awana club on Tuesday night. We would let the kids play one quick game, just to run up and down the aisle, something like that. We have it on the church has it on their website, on the newsletters, and then the other thing, years ago, our associate pastor, who's now our senior pastor, he was the only one in the office on Mondays. So I used to stop by his office on Mondays with 2 cinnamon rolls I got from 7-Eleven down the street, and we would sit in church. We would sit in his office, spend an hour talking about Jesus and kids and the gospel, and so he saw my heart for the gospel and for kids. So that's just a couple tips there. So anyways, just to kind of sum it up, hey, connection with the Lord, connection with our kids, connection with parents, with leaders, with the church. And so that's just to sum that up. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Bob and Jerry. And, feel free to share this with the rest of the people on your team. And so anyways, thanks a bunch.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.